What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is D.H. Thorne here. This particular video is sort of a repeat, rehashing, refinement of an older video series I did called Beyond the Goetia. And at the time that I did that video, I was heavily researching the origins of the Goetia, what they meant, what it all meant to itself in its own little view there. And I was finding the hints of the information in Gnosis, which I have compiled and figured out thus far. And by no means is it complete, by no means is it ever going to be finished, but it's important, I think, that you, as one of my viewers, be aware of my position on the Ars Goetia and a lot of things in demonolatry in general. Now, not too long ago, I did a video about Are You Still Christian? And it was an attempt to not quite trigger, but to maybe make some of you question a little bit some of your own practices. It wasn't necessarily a should or shouldn't video. It wasn't like a if you're doing this, then you should stop video. It was more of a ask yourself some questions video. And I don't think it quite had the impact that I wanted. So I want to go through this topic today, this video, talking about the Ars Goetia and demons in general, and really kind of get to the heart and soul of things so that maybe you can expand your practices to be a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more powerful, and to maybe realize that you don't necessarily need these things to have a vivid and complete spiritual journey. They are just an option. Now, first and foremost, as I talk about quite often, I practice what is considered a type of theurgy. And theurgy is a little different from thaumaturgy in that thaumaturgy is seeking to cause miracles like changing the world around you, getting yourself wealth. Whereas theurgy, while that can happen, because you are definitely, you can definitely cause that to happen, I should say, by working with spirits. You can sort of aim for the same things. You can ask Lucifer to guide you through a certain issue, or you can ask Lilith to help you destroy your enemies, or anything like that. There's all kinds of ways that you can employ spiritual beings in your life to evoke change in your life. It's a valid method of doing so. It sort of off-puts some of the responsibility from yourself to the spirit world. This in some ways is a good thing. It's a way, more of a traditional magician might do things with sigils and candles and no spirits, and just it's their will versus the universe. And a big part of that process is disconnecting and being non-attached to the outcomes of what they're doing. That's difficult for some people, understandably so. But when working with the spirit, you kind of have an excuse. You've got the ability to say, it's not in my hands, it's in the spirit world's hands. That way, if things work, you can't take too much credit, but you can still take a little. But if it doesn't work, you go, well, I guess it wasn't up to me, it was in God's hands, right? That's what Christians would say. How different are you from a Christian if your perspective is that, well, I'm leaving it up to Dantalion, and if Dantalion doesn't do it for me, therefore maybe it's not best for me, right? It's a way to have an excuse so that you don't worry about it too much, so that you're sort of you put some distance between you and the outcome, so that this way it doesn't reflect badly on you. It also means that when you get good gnosis, or things that you think are good gnosis, you can very easily talk about them and say, this is what the Spirit told me, and if you don't believe in this, then you don't believe in the Spirit. And this way, if you're wrong, you get to blame it on the Spirit. The Spirit told me faulty information. This way I could whatever, learn or something. It's not my fault, it's the Spirit's fault, or I learned because the Spirit did this to me. So it's always a way for you to put things off. And it's a valid way to approach spirituality, but you have to understand these little features and details, because if you don't, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I understand this. Whenever I work with spirits, I understand that I'm working with their energy. I'm working with their thought form, with whatever it is that it is. And I'm not a theistic person at all. I don't believe in gods in the sense that they created the universe. The line between a spirit being real and it being a god is a very fine one, but for some people it's a very important one. They get really bent out of shape if you don't call them gods or demons or whatever, if you don't see them as somehow theistically real. I don't do that. I see them as conceptually real. I see them as spiritually real. Their egregore is 100% real, and it's valid, and you can talk to it and walk with it, and it influences mankind, and it definitely plays a role in the real world. It's just that it is not like gods that have magical powers that can bend reality because they are more real than a rock or something. It's not how this works, okay? So there's a lot of head games going on here. And part of that is the origin of the beings that we talk about. And so the Beyond the Goetia video series was kind of like an examination, to the best of my knowledge and ability, to look into what the Goetia are, where they come from. And I don't think I'll ever find a satisfying answer, because I believe that the vast majority of the Goetia is sort of, charlatanry from the Middle Ages, to be brutally honest. There is nothing real about the Solomonic methods in the systems that surround the Ars Goetia. The Ars Goetia is a Rolodex of spirits that was put sort of as a component of the Lemegeton, which was a series of Solomonic, the Lesser Key of Solomon, which was meant to be a book of magic based on King Solomon from the Abrahamic tradition. And it was, of course, based loosely in things that we can identify as valid going back further. We can definitely say that there were spiritual and ritual practices that are related to things like, Kabbalistic, rabbinical stuff. There's absolutely, the use of names like Tetragrammaton and things like that, the angels. There's a lot going on there that is of, we'll say, valid components. But to say that those are the way King Solomon worked with those spirits is clearly false. It's clearly not. It doesn't hold any real water. People will say, like, they'll compare, for example, the Necronomicon to valid grimoire. They'll say the Necronomicon's not valid, but the Lesser Keys of Solomon is. And to me, that gives me a chuckle, because I see them as the same. They are, someone created them, someone who understood magical technology, definitely, for sure, but someone created them as sort of an artful work. It was meant to sell copies, if you will. It was meant to be something that would be forbidden and be shared in this era of grimoires being passed around. And this is what it was. Now, that doesn't mean they don't work, because you have to have this understanding that the fact that they were made up doesn't mean that they don't work. It's actually really important for you to understand that there is no mechanical methodology to magic. There is no lever that you pull that makes magic work. The lever that you pull, if there are any, are all internal things. They're all things that your subconscious has to do. They're all things that you're doing with your own awareness, and it's a yogic practice. You're aligning yourself with your greater self. You're recognizing that this you is also the same as the you outside of you, that you're the same you, and that you have this capacity to reflect and manifest the experiences that you need to have. Not necessarily want, because want implies what your ego says, but what you need to have, which is something that is higher. Now, Beyond the Goetia touches on the fact that these spirits, there's a whole lot of, to say malarkey would be kind. There's a whole lot of bullshit going on with them. That does not mean, I want to preface this, when I say the bullshit, I don't want to imply that you can't work with those spirits as written. You absolutely can. You can encounter them. They're very valid as egregores, but anyone who has experienced spiritual beings will know that the archetypes of the Ars Goetia are newer egregores. They're newer masks that are worn by older gods, spirits, and folklore, okay? They are not true in and of themselves unless you believe the Abrahamic lore. If you believe the Abrahamic lore, then you believe you're going to hell because you're a demon worshiper, or because you don't worship Jesus Christ, or whatever it is. Maybe you're more rabbinical or something. You believe that your practices are damning you to hell because you are not loving Yahweh. If you are in that paradigm, my videos probably don't resonate well with you. If you're still in that Christian trap, that Abrahamic trap of this is the only reality, and that God created the world in 6 days, or whatever it is, if you're still in that world where Yahweh or Satan, it's an either or Coke and Pepsi situation, if you're in that reality, then you're not going to resonate with this video. You're going to say, oh, blasphemy, King Paimon is absolutely a real god from blah, blah. I'm not saying that King Paimon doesn't represent something real. I'm saying that King Paimon is what a bunch of Christians concocted in the middle of the night in a dark room to scare themselves, is basically what it is. And it works. It works quite well. You can absolutely contact King. I've done it many times. But I've got to be brutally honest with you guys. It's been several months since I've done a working with a demon for my own good. In fact, I haven't worked with any gods or demons or dark spirits in months. It's just not what I'm doing lately. My interest lately has been on self-growth, on exploring the world, maybe returning to a natural perspective a little bit, maybe moving a little bit towards dark shamanism. I'm still, of course, enthralled with Lucifer. Lucifer is still my go-to archetype of adversarial enlightenment, but that doesn't mean I've ever worshiped Lucifer. Lucifer is not something I put on a pedestal and then worship. That's not how that works for me. It is rather, I identify this archetype of Lucifer that is valid and real, and it has a conscious awareness. It does move through our culture. It definitely it manifests in our world, in our behavior, and in the patterns of nature. We see it, and it's totally real for those of us who are sensitive to these things. There is no denial that Lucifer is a mask for an archetype that is 100% vivid and rational and real. It's just that Lucifer is a mask, and I can take that mask off and put it back on at will, and I don't feel any the less for it. I don't feel like I've lost anything. So the Goetia is just a book of Christian thematic masks that resonated with people from the Middle Ages. And those masks were syncretized. You can syncretize a lot of those masks with former religions, superstitions, and folklore that the medieval Christians would have had some knowledge of, either because of the still existent pagans and heathens roaming around, doing their work maybe in an occulted way, the lore of Christianity that was still shared, especially among the priest class, that maybe had access to, things that were maybe forbidden in some ways, especially during like later periods, but it was still there. Like they still had knowledge of the Greek and Roman gods. And in fact, if you look into this, which I've looked a little bit, and there's people who probably know a lot more than me, if you really look deeply into how the Christians treated the pagan traditions, they turned some of the pagan gods into good guys that you weren't really supposed to worship or pray to, but were like saints, right? They sort of saw them as okay, A good example of this would be if you read the Inferno series, if you read Dante's Inferno, if you read the other stories in that thing where he goes eventually to heaven and stuff, you'll see a treatment of these entities as being saint-like or positive angels, right? You see this acknowledgement that these gods were good guys, and not really satanic, right? Because it was kind of a rough sell, to say that all of the spirits were Satan's minions or something for a lot of people. They had to bring people into the Christian fold who for generations believed in these other things. You had to syncretize things. This is what always happens in every culture. Every time two cultures meet, and whether they're friendly or not, if there's any kind of cultural exchange going on to the point where they're trying to influence each other, sooner or later they identify gods in both of their pantheons that are basically the same, just with different headdresses, right? That's the joke. Like it's the same god wearing a different headdress. They identify gods that do the same things and have similar stories with them, and they syncretize them. They say, this god is this god in this culture, and this is why we have a tendency. This is why you see a lot of modern occultists, when they're channeling a spirit, one of the things that we all do, I've done it and many other people do it, I shouldn't say all, but a very large majority of us do, is while we're researching the spirits and channeling them and talking about them, we'll say things like, this spirit was Anubis from this era, and blah, 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 blah. Because we recognize subconsciously the archetype that is the same, that is the thing that is wearing the mask, okay? Because the archetype is the God. The archetype is the spiritual truth behind the God. The mask is just what the culture does with it, okay? So the Goetia is this Christian twist, this fearful Christian twist on mostly pagan and biblical elements of their culture at the time. And it's very difficult to find them all, because some of them are so steeped in the themes of the era that I don't know enough, and maybe people who lived then wouldn't know enough. But some might laugh. Some people might laugh at some of the Goetic spirits and say, "Oh, I know who that is. That's this funny little goofy character from this." This common entertainment that was going around. Think of it this way. Um, think of something that's very something very current in the meme world, but maybe 10 years old. Take like overly attached girlfriend. Okay, so imagine almost everybody, or Bad Luck Brian. Take the memes from the early noughties, from the early thousands, and think about those characters. And now imagine that they became cultural archetypes for things in our culture, and someone demonized them. So now overly attached girlfriend becomes the succubus of attachment or something, or Bad Luck Brian is the demon of bad luck. And they take these ideas and turn them into demons, things that people would be aware of, and Christians would go, yeah, that makes total sense. Maybe that is a demon, and that's how they embrace them. But fast forward 200 or 300 years, people are like, overly attached girlfriend and Bad Luck Brian, what are these guys? What are those? Okay, and that's kind of where we're at with the majority of the Goetic spirits. Not all of them, but the at least 2/3 of them are like that. No matter where you look, you're not going to find them. Dantalion's a good example. Dantalion is a spirit where it's a dead end. If you try to figure out what it's syncretized based off of, there's several spirits that kind of resonate a little bit. You know, especially considering Dantalion is supposed to have 3 heads, one, and there's different interpretations of this as well. Does it have 3 faces? One's a man, one's a woman, blah blah blah, or is it 3 women? Is it Hecate? Is it something like that? Who are we talking about here? It has a lot to do with love. Well, what do we mean by that? Is it a lustful demon? And Dantalion kind of sounds like D'Artagnan or something. It sounds like a name that a lover would have in a medieval romance story. And it's sort of like, what does it mean? Where do we find the answer? King Vine is another great example of one where the name, for example, you can't syncretize it with anything in any other culture or history very easily. I heard and read somewhere that there is a medieval siege engine that is called a Vine or a Vina or something like that. You think I'd know this because I know a lot about medieval weaponry, but I've never heard of this. I've looked it up. I can't find it, but I've heard this said a few times. And that's sort of like somehow a reference to this. But King Vine, if you look at what he does and his symbolism, he's actually Mahis from Egypt, who is I think I might have forgotten, but I think he's like the son of Bast or Sekhmet or something like that. He's a lion-headed god of he's an avenger basically. He's there to uphold the spiritual laws of, what is it, Nefertum or whoever, and this is what he does. And he's if you look at what he's known for, if you look at his Egyptian profile and then look at the Goetic Vine, they're the same, pretty much blow for blow. It's pretty amazing, like how close they are, to the point where it's like, were the Christians talking about Mahis, and where did they learn about this spirit? Where did they get that from? Was it something in their culture that they knew about, or did the archetype just carry forward through the various cultures and emerge as a valid spirit in the Christian mind? Very possible either way. I'm open to either one. You have spirits like Baal, with Bael, which was the medieval, European way of basically talking about Baal. And by Baal, they were talking about all of the Baals, because it's never specified in the Bible. In the Bible, they talk about Baal. They don't talk about which one. Is it Hadad? Is it Ammon? Is it, which one is it? Or Hammon, however you want to say it. Don't forget how we pronounce these things is ridiculous in a way, because if you go back in history to the origin of these spirits, I should title this video "The Origin of Spirits." Forget about the origin of almost like I'm being like Darwinistic here. The origin of these spirits is cultural, and that culture is dead for the most part. Most of these cultures are completely dead, forgotten, and buried. Their languages aren't spoken anymore outside of scholastic things. Sometimes we don't even know how they're supposed to be pronounced. We just know what they mean. When we go back and we look at this and we say, take Samaria, for example. Most of these deities are, from our knowledge of them, it comes from the Proto-Indo-European, period of humanity, which was a large, group of cultures that were kind of unified by this one culture. It was the Proto-Indo-European culture. And they were probably from the steppes of Russia or northern Turkey, right around, by the way, where you find things like, possibly northern Turkey, but where you find maybe Göbekli Tepe. These are very old civilizations, and their myths are syncretized from east to west as far as you can go, from Indra in the east to Jupiter and Zeus and Marduk and Bel if you go to the west or to the Middle East. They are absolutely the same characters, the same archetypes, expressed in their own cultural metaphor. Now, again, the names are completely wild, because if you go back, there's different ways of saying the name. So we're talking about Baal. Okay, one of the very first spirits I tried to contact in my Goetic research was Baal, and I tried to reach the Goetia's version of Baal, to no luck. I could not get away from Baal Hadad. Baal Hadad was the one who came through for me when I researched Baal, because Baal never made sense to me. It seemed like this ridiculous creature that was this chimera, and I don't mean to insult that egregore. It didn't match, it didn't resonate with me. And so as I'm looking for it, I found Baal Hadad, and that is the one that came through for me, and that is the one that I work with. And I use the sigil of Baal for it very often, but I ignore Baal as written in the Goetia, where what does he do? He can make you invisible, and his sigil looks like a fly a little bit, and he's got the head of a cat and a toad and a man or something crazy like that, and a spider body and all this other stuff. To me, that chimera kind of element of this spirit speaks to the fact that somehow the validity of the spirit is that when the Christians channeled it to create this, whether they channeled it in ritual or just in their imaginations, when they channeled this spirit in the Goetia, they somehow contemplated and understood that this spirit had a myriad of forms, because Baal, is not just one spirit. It is a group of spirits, Baal meaning Lord, and there are a lot of lords. Now, generally though, if we're talking about the period of Acadia, Mesopotamia, Canaan, where the Abrahamists would have picked this up, they're probably talking about Hadad, Bel, Marduk, Jupiter, and Zeus. They're the same syncretized being as who they're talking about. It's the same archetype wearing different masks of a similar nature in each one of these cultures. Yes, there's obvious differences, but the things that they're most known for are the same. The god of storms and weather and fertility and war and all this, that's the same guy. They all killed their father or castrated their father or their mother. They were a central figure in this war in the heavenly realms, where they liberated everybody because they destroyed the hegemony of the prior gods, we'll say. So it's again, Baal is Baal Hadad, most likely, but it's also Baal Ammon and all the other Baals, okay? And that's pretty much all the male gods of Mesopotamia, you could say. But most likely it's those two that they're talking about. Now, of course, in the Goetia and in the Lesser Keys of Solomon and all this, there's reference to a Maimon. Now, a Maimon is Amun or Hamon or Baal Hamun, okay? And somewhat syncretized with Amun before Amun became Amun-Ra. They're similar beings. Not to be confused with Ammon, which is just another, most likely, regurgitation of this concept, but like the dark killer side of Baal Amun. Now, there's so much here that this is why I urge all of you, if you're working with the Goetia, get yourself a dictionary of spirits, both demons and gods, and go through them and do your research and locate what pagan gods resonate with these spirits. You're going to find that the pagan gods came first by sometimes many thousands of years before the medieval demons came about in our work. And this is why another meaning of the Beyond the Goetia epithet is that I am kind of over working with the Goetia. Not to say that I won't work with them anymore, especially if someone comes to me with a request, Thorne, I need you to please work with Mother Lilith and help me out. Lilith, of course, being less easily syncretized. She's kind of like her own entity, because but she isn't, though, because she's based on Sumerian lore. If you look it up, Lilith is first encountered in the Sumerian lore, and the Abrahamic stuff is like Actually, not that far off from how the Sumerians saw Lilith in the Sumerian. In other words, the Abrahamists didn't let that nut fall far from the tree. She was demonized in both cultures, so she's kind of the same in both in a lot of ways. Although she was probably a little bit more respected in the Sumerian culture, because in the Sumerian culture, while there was definitely good and evil, and there was bad guys and good guy spirits and all of this, even good guy spirits could wreck your day, right? Even they were things to be a little bit concerned with and to be respected. And even bad spirits could serve a good purpose in your life. So it wasn't like completely taboo to acknowledge these other spirits. Whereas in Christianity, you're not supposed to do that. So, but Lilith isn't part of the Goetia. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But part of the title, part of the meaning of Beyond the Goetia is that I myself am a little tired, a little fatigued with the Goetic brick wall. And the Goetic brick wall is that the Goetia, to me, is very clearly something that was created by Christians, ignorant Christians, trying to perhaps understand the lore of history or create a grimoire that would sound like demons. Because you have to understand the reason behind it, the way they saw things. They saw things to do with God, Yahweh and Jehovah, as being sparkling and bright, and they were filled with noble imagery, wings and eyes and lions' heads and things like that. And things that were evil were bestial. Okay, that's is why every demon is somehow an animal in the Goetia. They're very rarely just a person. And when they are just a person, there's something that to them at the time would have been seen as evil. Why do you think King Paimon was so Arabic looking in the lore? Now, most would tell you King Paimon is not Arabian, okay? Most people who've worked with him, King Paimon's like one of the first to say, no, that's not me. I'm not a Muslim or an Arab or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not what I am. Most people who've really deep dove into him come up with definitely something in that direction of but they're looking more towards Africa, and Atlantis is I think the people who hit on Atlantis are the ones that are hitting on something very valid. King Paimon being Aemon from ancient Atlantis. Maybe. That's the unverified personal gnosis I've gotten that I verified with 3 or 4 other occultists, okay? But I'm not the only one, and you're going to hear this many times. Some people have even said Azazel, or Azazel, Azazel are King Paimon. Doesn't resonate for me, but some people say they are because there's a similarity between the names of what they mean and so on. There's reasons for it, and I don't discredit them. They're just not what resonate for me. So we do this with all of these spirits, and we look and we see, so King Paimon was Arabic in this medieval period because, hey, crusades are a thing. They didn't like the Muslims that were, that had control over Jerusalem and stuff. So they were going to demonize, if you come up with a demon, what are you going to make it look like? Well, it's going to look like, some kind of a man-animal monster, or it's going to look like something in a culture you don't like, something that is culturally unfavorable, something that is genuinely and generally regarded as bad. I forget the exact name of the Goetic spirit because I don't have it memorized because I'm not a worshiper of the Goetia. But there's this one Goetic spirit that is basically like a huntsman in green, looks like Robin Hood. Like description's exactly Robin Hood. Is that supposed to be Robin Hood from the folklore, or is that supposed to be like the Green Man from Celtic and Druidic lore? What is this character? Why does he seem so much like Robin Hood with his bow and all of this stuff? Why is this? And this is, again, I'm telling you, my own gnosis from working with these spirits, my own research, you owe it to yourself. If you want to dedicate yourself to really mastering this and understanding theurgy and how this is meant to work, don't worship these things as written. Research them. Ask them to educate you, because everything I'm telling you didn't just come because I looked at them and says, you can't be what you're telling me. I'm not arguing with the spirit when it's coming to me. I asked them, could you please show me your true nature? Who are you really? What were the Christians thinking about when they found you? Are you really a demon in hell? What are you? And each and every one of them says, hell is a dream. Hell is something that people go to by intention. People go to hell on purpose. When you live your life and you die, and you don't really die, but when your body dies and you abandon the embodied dream and you go off into this experience, this internal expansion of self, you recognize that the body is not the end. Your next experiences are either going to be reborn or to have some kind of an afterlife that may last however long you want it to. And this afterlife may be in a heavenly plane, a hellish plane, or a plane of your own design, or any combination thereof. The infernal world, the infernal hellish realms are created by us, and we are in them in life as much as in death. We go there even in life. You ever have a nightmare? You've been to the infernal realms. You ever have a day where you're feeling really guilty and you're just punishing yourself and you hate yourself, you hate your life, everything sucks, maybe somebody died and you're miserable and you just can't stand life right now? You're in hell. That's what hell is. That's it. But you're still here in your body. You're kind of one foot in both worlds, and you mistakenly think that this is what it is, that you're alive and you're miserable. Well, hell is basically the same thing. And I've asked them, are you denizens of hell? And they're like, for those of us who need us in hell, we're there. You bring us with you. Wherever you go, we're still there as archetypes. You can find us there however you want to find us. And if you want to put us as evil and dark, you're going to find evil and dark. If you want to see us as punishers and tormentors, you're going to see us as punishment and torment. In a way, the Goetia, and of course I'm always attracted to things that are shadowy, is the Christian shadow personified. It is Christian hang-ups personified in archetypal beings that they can be afraid of or worship or whatever. Okay, that's what it is. They're basically looking inside themselves, finding shadow people, and putting living masks on them of demons. And of course, it's based heavily on the lore that they loved or feared, or both. The Christian lore that was beaten into their heads that they better respect. So of course, their understanding of Baal is going to be completely tainted by what it says in the Bible. Look at Balaam, okay? A very cool spirit in Ars Goetia, one of my favorites, a powerful spirit of divination, one of the few that I like to work with anyway, is based on a Christian false prophet in the Old Testament, okay? Who has this encounter with, I believe, Raphael and all of this stuff, and he's basically a false prophet, okay? And they turn him into a demon. That's look it up. That's, if you look up the name, that's where it comes from. And it's the same kind of character. It's this demon of divination, prophecy, okay? So the more we look and the more we find relations, who knows what's been lost? Don't forget, the Christians of the 1500s would have had different Bibles running around, different ideas of what's valid and what's not, things that are no longer canonical, that are lost and gone, or maybe things hidden in the Rome, the library in Rome or whatever. There's stuff hidden that we don't know about that maybe was influencing things at the time. They maybe had popular works of lore that we don't have anymore, that maybe were lost or that we just don't talk about. Maybe someone who's really deep into theology or something, who really studied like as a Catholic and was studying to become a priest and knows all of these lost, apocryphal works, maybe knows more than I'm talking about. But you can look it up and you find this time and time and time again, to the point where it's so often that even if it's not the majority of them, it's enough of them that you can tell what the purpose was. So for those of you who are running around worshiping these spirits, I am not criticizing you, although I don't really believe in worshiping anything. For those of you who are treating them as theistically real beings that are really denizens of hell, working for Satan and Lucifer, if you're being sincere in your practices, you need to research. Otherwise, you're no better than a Christian who discredits the archaeological facts. If you're a Christian who believes in the creation myth and says that the world was created in 6 days, and therefore you deny everything in science that says that the universe is 13 billion years old, 14 billion years old, and that the earth is 4 billion years old, and that life appeared 3 billion years ago, and that we evolved like 100 million, a million years ago, and 100,000 years ago, humans became kind of recognizable as to what we are today. And it's definitely not 6,000 years old. Even Samaria goes back further. Göbekli Tepe would predate the flood by like 5,000-6,000 years potentially. If you're one of those Christians who denies those things, you're going to be in good company with the demonolators who believe in what I'm talking about as real. If you believe that Lucifer is the king of hell, Satan is the king of hell, and this whole Christianized pantheon, the way you see it, you're kind of still living that delusion, because if you look in virtually every case, there's a mistake or a translation, mistranslation, or a Christian twist on something much older than them. So Lucifer is probably the example I'm going to end on. It's one of the most powerful examples. Lucifer means light bringer. If you look up the origin of Lucifer in Christian myth, you'll find that it didn't exist before the year 300 or so. That's when the mistranslation happens, the misunderstanding of a line in the Bible that becomes Lucifer the light bringer, thus Satan. And it's basically an egregore created by Dark Age Christians that perpetuated into the Middle Ages, and culminating, in my opinion, the absolute masterpiece of Lucifer's creation was Paradise Lost by Milton. And this description of Satan as Lucifer, and conflating the two so fully and creating this vivid, rebellious, cosmic rebel character that you can't help but feel kind of a combination of pity and apprehension and love for. Like, at least me, when I read the character of Lucifer, I totally understand. I get it. Like, I'm not, it's almost like people who like Thanos. It's like, I'm not saying they were right, but I understand, right? That's how you feel about the character in Paradise Lost. I get it. And that was the point. And this character was the culmination of all the myth at the time. This was like when Disney took Snow White, which was an old fairy tale, and turned Snow White into the Snow White of Disney. Okay, and now everybody knows that Snow White. Everybody who hears of Snow White doesn't think of the old fairy tale Snow White. They think of the Disney Snow White. That's Snow White now. Just like Lucifer was taken by Milton and turned into the Lucifer we know now. So I know some of you are like, how dare you insult my God? Okay, fine. Then curse me all you want. Have fun. I'm protected. It'll be fine. I'm not offended by your disagreement. Hopefully you're not offended by my disagreement. I'm not saying they don't exist as something you can work with. Obviously, I work with them. Lucifer is one of my favorites. It's top 3 spirits that I like to talk to. But that doesn't mean that I consider Lucifer as Lucifer to be real. Lucifer is a mask for something even greater. That's what you are. You're a mask for something as well. When you come to understand, and this is the art of theurgy. This is when the magic of theurgy really kicks in. When you're working with those spirits and you come to understand that they're masks for something archetypal and bigger, and you really ask yourself, what does that mean? Why is that an archetype? Why is that a mask? What does it mean to be a mask? And then you look at yourself in comparison, because that's what you should do. You know, you should be looking for the things about the two of you that resonate. When you see that you have this similarity, you realize, hey, I'm a mask for something too. I'm a mask for my awareness, and my awareness is something else. It's something bigger than this, and it contains all of this. And when it hits, when you figure it out, you say, they're just as valid as stories as I am, and just as invalid. And then the magic happens. At that point, you have a kind of collapse of your cognitive biases in the delusion of Maya. You begin to realize, it begins to unravel. The separation between you and the gods disappears. The separation from you and your peers disappears. The separation from you and your dog begins to disappear. You begin to say, all of this is an illusion. And you might have an existential crisis, and I hope you have fun with it. Anyway, I'm going to leave this here. If you guys like this video, go ahead and check out my older videos on the subject. I like this one better now, but check them out. I'm going to be repeating some of my old videos a little bit and refining them occasionally. So check them out. Hopefully you guys like it all. If you like what I'm doing, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you chat down below. Give us a comment. Tell me what you think. If you hate me, tell me you hate me. Maybe I'll delete your comment. Maybe I'll love it. You never know. I might argue with you. So have fun in the comments. If you also want to help me out, I've got a load of books. I got 3 books that are out. I've got a lot of things that you can help me out with on Patreon. If you want to join my Monday class that I hold every Monday from 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 just about, join me on Patreon and check that out. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thanks for your support, and mind the shadows.